Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Dennis Wilson back for yet another episode of We the People 250 podcast. This is episode number 11, and we're starting to put some puzzle pieces together, as I told the kids last time. If this is your first time with me, I want to just mention that uh, all of us, all the American citizens, got on board the USS Constitution, harbored in Boston Harbor as a museum, but we have been given an opportunity to take it, and we're going to travel the world looking for the principles that formed Republican democracy and gave us the United States Constitution. So we have gone back and we now have four pieces of the puzzle. We first talked about Moses, and then we journeyed over to Greece. We went to Athens, the city-state of Athens, and we learned about Socrates, and we learned about Plato, and we learned about Aristotle. And those three political philosophers have become legends, famous in their own time, as well as here we are more than 2,500 years later, and they're still part of our consciousness when it comes to political science. Actually, the last one that we talked about was Aristotle, and he is known as the father of political science. So obviously, his contributions were great. One little trivia fact that I found out, I just was thinking about Athens and why it fell, and the three philosophers talked about the the corruption, the corruption within their direct democracy. They could, you could clearly see if you were present, you could see, the schemes and the backdoor deals and everything that went down that brought on the corruption, the decay of morals or values, uh, virtues, and then the constant wars that they had to fight with other city states, principally Sparta, and they never were able to reconcile that and bring it to a peaceful conclusion. But there was another thing. I'm thinking, wait a minute, what else? And it hit on me. What about the money? So I went and looked as to what their national debt was in 425 BC, and they were 7,000 talents, that was their currency, 7,000 talents in debt. And this was a very small city state. This wasn't a great big nation state like ours. And that represented $2.7 billion, okay? And so they defaulted on that debt, um, and after the default on the debt, which means they can't pay it, and so all this money they borrowed becomes bad money, and it starts a cascading effect on their financial structures and help to bring it into their direct democracy. So there was other things at work, and one of them was the finances. Does that kind of ring a bell as to what might be going on today in our own current state of affairs here in the United States? Think about it. Okay, first of all, today, I kind of got ahead of myself, excited about this next podcast, but I want to do as I said I would do, the Pledge of Allegiance. I know it's old school, but please join in. Here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so we got that out of the way. Now, today, kids, we are going to embark. We're going to leave the city-state of Athens. Like I said, we now have three more puzzle pieces on our road to discovering who made contributions to the ideas of republicanism. And so we're going to journey. We're not going to go west across the Mediterranean. We have to go east. We have to go back to Cana or to Israel, and we have to go to Jerusalem. And so we're going to step back in time, and we are going to do that in a moment. But first, one more thing. I said that I wanted to create the Kids Corner. I want to keep them interested in what's going on. And if you remember last time, I asked the kids to put together a virtue compass, okay, with 4 characteristics of virtue on their compass. And I hope you did that. I hope you had time to sit down with your parents and talk about what makes a virtuous person, what makes that good citizen. And I want you to keep, as we talk today, I want you to keep in mind what you have put down on your compass, and you adults, what's on your compass, and what our next discovery will encompass, and how many of its ideas are on your page, okay? Just for the fun of it. So let's go ahead and we will go forward. We'll come back to that, but we got to move on. We have to keep the ship rolling, as you would say. So we are going to sail out, and we're going to leave Athens, and we are going to Jerusalem. Why? Because one of the individuals who had an absolute profound effect on virtue, on moral values, was the one and only Jesus Christ. And I have to go down that road today. And I don't want to burn any bridges here. We know that there were other people throughout history that have their own religions and their prophets and so forth, and their own God. And I don't want to step on any toes here. I can't afford to lose anyone. We're living in a very apathetic times. Apathy is a cancer, as I said before, and I need each and every one of you to join this cause. Now, whether you watch my podcast or someone else's podcast on the Constitution, that's fine with me. But we all have to get engaged. We have to get off of the seat, and we have to do something to advance the cause of our understanding of the Constitution. So I hope you will stay with me, and I hope that as we move forward, I can do a better job, and I feel more comfortable with this. So with that in mind, I am wading into a field of history that there are a lot of other people that can do a much better job at this. But I've got to move forward with this because Jesus Christ had a profound influence on virtue, and that's what we're after, and we will get into that and tell you why as we go along. But let me kind of just describe the time when Jesus was growing up in Bethlehem and then in Jerusalem. Everybody knows the story that this young man became a carpenter, and he was good at his trade, and he did that for many years. We also know that he went down and would engage in debates and discussions with the Pharisees, and the Pharisees were the religious Jewish leaders, and they were overwhelmed by his knowledge of religion, absolutely overwhelmed. And this was just a young man. So anyway, they knew of this young man. And then, of course, later on, he gives up his carpentry, um, and he begins his ministry in bringing Christianity to the world. And what we want to draw from this is the virtuosity, the moral values that he gave us in his teachings that are so important for self-governance and a Republican democracy. Okay, so that's what we're going to kind of take a look at here. So bear with me as we go along, and I want to begin with a little bit of some troubling history that went on as Jesus went out into the communities, the broader community, went out to other towns and areas around him, and professed his beliefs in Christianity. And as he did that, of course, he was under the watchful eye of the Romans, because the Romans controlled that area. They had heard about him, and he was also more closely scrutinized by the Pharisees. Some of them began to see him as a threat. And so they were there, they were in the crowd, they were listening to everything that was said. And I learned this just the other day. I always wondered, why did he speak in parables? And what is a parable? A parable is a short story or a short narrative making a number of points or points on a particular issue or subject. Okay, sounds pretty simple and easy. But why at this time does Jesus turn to the parables? He turns to the parables because he knows he still has a mission ahead of him that has to be completed. So he begins to talk in these parables, and the parables had a dual message. One was a message for, human activity in and around Jerusalem, the day-to-day work of people in various areas and what they did. Much of it was rural farming area. And so when he was trying to make a point, he would speak in parables. The other part of that was the deeper meaning of what he was trying to get at, not for life on this earth, but the next to come. And he wanted to conceal that from those who did not understand, did not want it, were out there to persecute him for it. And so that's why he used parables. Okay, kind of interesting. So I want to talk about 2 or 3 of those parables and kind of get into the point that he's trying to make. And when we do that, there are a list of virtues, and I want to give that list of virtues to you now that he's trying to teach us. Okay, of course, the first is love, mercy, kindness, faithfulness, patience, the meaning of grace, self-control, and there's a couple more. Excuse me, I've got to look. I'm sorry. There's a couple. I don't want to leave them out. Faithfulness, gratitude, and peace. I say peace for the last one because in all of Jesus' teachings, he wanted us not to, worry about tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day to come. He wanted us to live in the present. He wanted us to be comfortable and secure in the present. Think about today. Um, think about your religious commitment. Think about your work. And be concerned about today. Trusting God that your expectations can be met. So, that last one I really like, because so many people who I know very close, um, they they worry and worry a lot. Worry about kids, worry about grandkids, worry about political world out there, just worry about a lot of different things. And Jesus says we have to trust in him. So I think trust in our own lives, being able to trust friends and family members on important things. Maybe it's just as simple as, hey, I need a ride to the hospital. Can you give me a ride to the hospital tomorrow and drop me off? Sure, I can do that. And you do it. You show up. You just don't stay in bed or go do something else or tell somebody you forgot. You have accountability. And God wanted us in the religious world to be accountable as well. So these, if you look at these, okay, these are all virtues that are significant in our continuing discussion of republicanism. Okay? Now, for these parables, I want to just go over a couple of them with you and talk about them. The first is the parable of the wine or the vineyard growers, uh, the parable of the vineyard growers. And this parable, um, Jesus gets together with his disciples and others, and he talks about this. And what happens is that there were vineyards all around Jerusalem and everywhere. Wine was a common drink at the time, and it'd be served with dinner and so forth. And anyway, this farmer who was the master of his place, um, he went out and he hired early in the morning, 6 o'clock. He hired field workers come in and work. He paid them 1 denarii. 1 denarii was the currency of the time, and it was a fair wage for the day, and it was common throughout the area. People knew it, the workers knew it, and it was a fair wage. And so along comes 9 o'clock. He goes out and he hires more. They don't talk about what they're going to get. They just come to work. 11 o'clock. He hires some more. He goes out in the afternoon at 5 o'clock and he hires some more. Okay? And so now it's 6 o'clock and it's the end of the day, and he advises his supervisor to go out there, and he says, I want you to pay the last first and the first hired last. Okay? So the last paid first and the first hired last. Okay? So he does. He goes out and he pays each one of them, whether they worked an hour, 3 hours, 2 hours, 4 hours, or they worked the entire day in the hot sun. Go out there and you pay each one of them 1 denarii. So he did. And those who had worked the entire day looked at that and said, man, that's not right. We were out here all day suffering in the field and under the hot sun, and we worked all day. And these people come in and they just work a few hours, some only 1 hour, and you pay them the same thing. And so the master says, did I not pay you what we agreed on? And they said, yes, you did. Okay, so I am the owner of this property. I am the owner of the vineyard. I have my money, and I can pay to whom whatever I want. Okay, And so I paid them all the same. They didn't know what they were going to get, and neither did you until I told you. Okay, so what's the teaching here? What's the deeper meaning of this parable? Um, it's one of incredible generosity. Okay, generosity. In this case, in the real world, in Jerusalem at the time, it was very generous of him to share what was his with everyone, and he did it in the way in which he chose to do. Um, and of course, the human mind had a difficult time wrapping their heads around that idea, but at that time, Jesus tells his disciples that there is more to this story, that when you come into God's world, the generosity abounds. And it's not based on merit or hard work, it's based on the grace of God. Okay? And so even today, I think you could have a difficult time with that idea of immense, limitless generosity. You don't see it much. There are some areas, I've talked to friends lately and family members about, who out there in our world is being extremely generous. And there's a number of wealthy individuals who are giving money to many different causes, whether it's hospitals or schools or research or whatever it might be. They are extremely generous and they give. Um, but, is it half of the billionaires or all the billionaires? Well, no. And again, it's their property. And so, they can call the shots as they will. But Jesus calls us to be generous, that you live, unfortunately, we live in a material world. Okay, remember the material girl. Well, this is a material world. And so he's saying that we are being distracted by all the things that we think we want and the things we think will make us happy. And that wealth is not going to um, uh, do that. Maybe temporarily, but what about when that car breaks down? Or the trip becomes, you're doing a whirlwind trip halfway around the world, and you run into huge turbulence, and you lose your purse, and somebody stole your passport, on and on. So these things cannot give us unabound happiness. Jesus says that the kingdom of heaven and the grace of God, not merit, but the grace of God will give us that happiness. So um, I think the message here for republicanism is that, generosity, especially in a time of need that we're seeing out there, I think generosity is way high on the list in terms of helping the community in very small ways. And maybe it's not money. Maybe you don't have a lot of money. Give your service. Give some of your time back, and people will appreciate that. Maybe it's giving somebody a ride to the doctor. Maybe it's giving somebody a ride to wherever. Today, my brother-in-law gave me a ride to Costco, and I was very grateful for that. And so I think we have to look at this, think of this as like two stories, one for this world and one for the next. Okay? Okay, now what about the next parable? The next parable that I'm just going to mention, and it's a very popular parable. It's the story about the Good Shepherd. And the Good Shepherd parable, of course, is the setting is in rural Jerusalem, and there were lots of sheep herders. That was, principal source of their income. They raised the lambs for meat, and the wool for, spinning clothes. So, that was a principal and important activity in the area. And so one day, the shepherd who has 100 sheep um, is out and minding his sheep, and he starts, towards the end of the day, he starts counting his sheep, and one's missing. He counts them again. One's missing. So he decides, I've got to go and find that lost sheep. And he tells his friends and neighbors about it. So he goes out and he looks and he looks and he looks and he looks. He's left his sheep for hours, and he looks. And finally, he finds that 100th sheep, puts it over his shoulders, and brings it back to the flock. But in doing so, he rejoices and tells his friends and neighbors, I got him. I got him back. He's back. He's back. And so, pretty simple story about, a shepherd who lost one of his sheep. Okay, but where's the deeper meaning in that? And what Jesus is trying to teach his disciples and to everyone um, is that he's looking, not they're already there. The people who understand his message, who sincerely believe in his message, who practice his teachings, they're in the flock. He's looking for those who have strayed away, those who have broken heart, those who are depressed, those who are unhealthy, etc., etc. That's the lost sheep that Jesus is looking for his kingdom to come. And so we see this as, a sense of promise that all of us have an opportunity for the next life, and no one is ruled out. They have to just come with an open heart. And so, what's the relevance of that to us today? Well, I think in the practical world that we live in, I just think there's a lot of opportunity there to express those feelings and try to bring understanding and use it day to day. Okay, so let's see. There was one more parable that I wanted to mention. Oh, it's the unforgiving servant. This is a good one. The unforgiving servant. So the king calls one of his servants to him, and he says, you owe me a lot. You owe me 10,000 talents. Okay? In today's money, that 10,000 talents was over $3 billion. And he said, you need to pay up. And he pleaded, he begged, he was on his knees, crying for forgiveness and mercy, and to give him an opportunity, that he just begged for him to have pity on him. And so his sincerity got to the king, and the king said, I forgive you. Go in peace. Really? That is a huge debt. And he could have parceled it out and said, okay, you're going to pay me X amount of money over the rest of your life. He didn't. And so the servant left. But it wasn't long, and he ran into one of his servants who owed him money. He owed him 200 denarii, which, to a worker or to a servant could be a lot of money, but not the kind of money he owed the king. And he grabbed him by the throat and he said, I want my money and I want my money now. And he pushed him away. And the servant pleaded with him and said, hey, look, I don't have it. I just don't have it. So um, just give me time, he says. And the servant had him thrown in jail. Well, other servants were there. They witnessed this. And they went to the king and told him what happened. And the king called the servant in. And he said, I had pity on you. I had forgiveness in my heart. And you have violated that trust. So, therefore, I'm going to have you thrown in prison until you pay the debt. Well, guess what? He spent the rest of his life in prison, as the story goes. So, that's the story, the first half of the narrative about, what happens in real life when you struggle to, pay your debts and so forth. But what about the spiritual side of this? Uh, you know, I think this is one of the most important parts of Christianity, is having, as Jesus says, as he says to his disciples, to have mercy and forgiveness for all. And he's extreme and radical in that belief. He goes as far to say that you need to have forgiveness and mercy for your enemies. Think about that one. For your enemies. Not only do you love your family and friends and neighbors, you have to give forgiveness. If you are struck on one cheek, turn and give them the other one. Don't play into their game, and try to resolve this with love and reconciliation, whatever the issue might be. And I think that carries a strong lesson for us today. We need to have a loving heart, an open heart, and a sincerity in terms of how we play with this idea of mercy. We must be forgiving. We all make mistakes, big and small, and it's just the way we are. We're human beings. So God wants us, Jesus wants us to reach out and have that mercy in our lives. And you can see how so many times, as we'll talk about when we get into American history and the Constitution and so forth, how the kinds of things that how punishments were dealt out, and it was in some ways very, very cruel. And we'll get into that and talk about those things. I'm almost out of time. The bell's almost ready to go off. So kids, for the next journey, I want you to find out when the Roman Republic was established, and I want to know when it failed and on what river it was begun. So with that, I hope you enjoyed my podcast. I did the best I could, and we'll all have some laughs, I'm sure, because my friends can be somewhat critical of my podcast, and I enjoy that. I'll get better. So until the next podcast, I hope that you have a great evening, a great rest of your week, and that you will come back. And also when you come back, bring a friend or two. Tell them, hey, this guy's a little wacky. I mean, look at me. I'm wearing a bright green John Deere sweatshirt, and I got a blue hat on. I know what my wife's going to say about that. But if you look at it, it does match to the state of Montana flag. So, there we go. Anyhow, have a great day. Bring a friend back. We need to multiply this a thousandfold and get as many people in the class as we can. So until next week, we'll see you later. Have a good day from the state of Montana. Bye.